The news hit like an avalanche yesterday. Explosive, shocking, the most significant event of the year, of the decade, of the century. The headlines were published on CNN, NBC News, ABC News, Fox, all over the media. It was trending on every social media platform. People all across this land were shouting about it from the rooftops. Town criers were announcing it in village squares. The earth-shattering news reverberated around the country and down through history and across space and time. Demi Lovato is changing her pronouns again. As People magazine reports, Demi Lovato is opening up about her recent pronoun change about 2 months after updating her pronouns on Instagram, adding she, her alongside the pronouns she'd been using since last year, which are they, them. Lovato recently spoke to host Tamara Dia on the Spout podcast about what led to the decision. In response to Dia asking Lovato to explain the concept of chosen pronouns like they, them, the 29-year-old singer-songwriter said, "Yeah, so they, them is, I've actually adopted the pronouns of she, her again." Now, if that sentence seemed to not make any sense, get ready for a bunch more sentences that also make no sense. Here is Lovato explaining her decision in more detail. She, of course, updates her pronouns like Apple updates the iPhone, and I mean both in terms of the frequency of the updates and the meaninglessness and redundancy of the updates. But here she explains why, I think.
I've actually adopted the pronouns of she, her again. So for me, I'm such a fluid person that I don't find that I felt like, especially last year, my energy was balanced and my masculine and feminine energy. So that when I was faced with the choice of walking into a bathroom and it said women and men, I didn't feel like there was a bathroom for me. Because I didn't feel necessarily like a woman. I didn't feel like a man. I just felt like a human. And that's what they, them is about for me. It's just about like feeling human at your core. Recently, I've been feeling more feminine.
Well, there you have it. Yesterday, yesterday you would have been banned on every social media platform for calling Demi she, and now you'll be banned if you don't. That's how this works. And she's simply getting in touch with her energy. Sometimes her energy is balanced. Sometimes her energy tips towards the feminine. Sometimes it's masculine. Sometimes her energy is low and she needs to plug into an outlet in the garage for a while. Now, obviously, none of this makes any sense at all. This is about as credible as the four humors theory of medicine, popular back in like the Middle Ages. And back then they believed that a person's physical health, their mental well-being, their personality were all determined by the balance of blood, bile, melancholy, and phlegm. And those are the four humors. And that theory fell out of favor once the human body and the brain were better understood and the existence of germs, was discovered. Though they may have actually been onto something on second thought, as there are lots of people in our society today who seem to be predominantly composed of bile and phlegm. And yet humorism was far more defensible and credible at the time because it was the best available theory to explain these aspects of the human person based on the information they had at the time. This gender identity nonsense, by contrast, is a superstition invented and propagated contrary to all of the ample amounts of evidence that we have on hand. We know that it's nonsense, and yet it has taken over our culture all the same. Now, I call it nonsense, and it is, but that doesn't mean that I can't make sense of it. I do, in fact, understand what Demi's trying to say. I think I understand what she's trying to say better than she does. Because this is all simply narcissism. Lovato has a cornucopia of mental illnesses and various addictions, and that certainly plays a role, but mostly this is the end result of spending nearly every waking moment of your life thinking about yourself, obsessing over yourself, analyzing yourself, and then analyzing your analysis of yourself. A person who adopts this, lifestyle choice of narcissism will quickly conclude that though she can't make up her mind about anything, and though she, by her own admission, doesn't understand herself in the slightest, she is certainly, she knows, more interesting, more nuanced, more complex, more richly and beautifully sketched than most other people in the world. This is the fundamental narcissistic assumption that serves as the basis for everything else. When it comes to gender identity, the narcissist feels a certain way, right? As we all feel different ways, but they can't actually know whether other people who share the same sex feel the same way, whether this is just how people feel. But she assumes that they don't feel as she does because she is her. She's not like anyone else. Her feelings are different and meaningful and profound in ways that nobody else's are. And so she can't make do with these sex categories that have proved sufficient for billions of humans before her. She needs a whole new category because she is that transcendent, she tells herself in her deluded, ego-crazed mind. And this would all perhaps be something about which we could simply shake our heads and laugh and then move on if it was a madness consigned to drug-addled Hollywood weirdos. But it's not. Worst of all, of course, children are being recruited into sharing in the same confusion and self-obsessed misery as Demi Lovato. And here is where the Lovato story does in fact have some resonance and relevance. This is why it's actually not something that we can simply dismiss. There's something important that can be learned from it, and that important thing is this. Demi Lovato is a grown woman, technically. She is an adult, at least in the chronological sense of the term. And yet she changes her gender identity, quote unquote, every 45 seconds. She can't make up her mind. What she said yesterday may not have any bearing on today. 1 minute, her deepest truth is that she's a non-binary pansexual shapeshifter, and the next minute, her truth is something else entirely. Now consider that kids are being drugged and mutilated, their bodies permanently altered based on their own gender identity declarations, which are somehow even more fickle and transmutable and fundamentally meaningless. Everything is fluid. Everything can be changed, except the bodies that are butchered and poisoned based on whatever form of identity or expression a child has assumed at that moment. There was a video recently that went viral which shows someone named Kellen Lackhard, a so-called gender specialist, whatever that is, at Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, admitting that in that program, Kaiser Permanente, children as young as 12 years old have had their breasts removed. 12 years old. Listen.
Yeah, I think folks have kind of covered the blockers and hormones, but I'll talk about surgical care a little bit. In terms of masculinizing top surgery, I think 12 is the youngest who's had surgery through our program. And in terms of general reconstructive surgeries, we haven't had anyone under the age of 18 have phalloplasty or linguinoplasty, but we have had a few patients starting 15, I don't think surgery actually happened until 16 that have had vaginoplasty.
Again, girls at the age of 12, not even in high school yet, and they're having body parts removed. We also hear that boys as young as 16, at an age when boys in particular are renowned for being impetuous and impulsive and unintentionally self-destructive, and yet at age 16 they're being castrated. Demi Lovato is almost 30 years old, and she can't decide what her gender energy is telling her at any given moment. How in God's name can we take an adolescent, still over a decade away from their brain being fully formed, how can we take them seriously when they make their own declarations? A few days ago, the radical LGBT group Stonewall tweeted that according to quote-unquote research, and they never do specify what the research is, of course, but just research shows, they say, that children as young as 2 can recognize their trans identity. 2. Adults in their 20s and 30s struggle to understand their identities, apparently. But actual babies, still in diapers, sleeping in cribs, can come to realizations that escape those approaching middle age or older. That's the point we should take away here. And it's why we actually shouldn't simply ignore the adult celebrities and other adults who parade around, with their different identity every other month. Far from ignoring it, we should be pointing to them. We should be putting them up on banners, saying, here, look at this, with the message, leave our kids out of this. If you want to join my exclusive fan base, or a cult, that's what it is, we're forming a cult, then all you got to do is click the subscribe button and ring the bell below this video to stay up to date with all my content. And if you want even more, you can watch or listen to my show at thedailywire.com, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. Looking forward to welcoming you to the Sweet Baby Gang.